The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged Afghan mountainside as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her scope for the third time in 10 minutes. The weight of her Barrett M82 sniper rifle felt familiar against her shoulder, like an old friend she had carried through countless missions. But today felt different. The intelligence reports had been sketchy at best, and the radio chatter from command suggested they were walking into something much bigger than originally planned. Maria had been with SEAL Team 6 for 4 years now, one of only a handful of women to earn her place among the elite unit. Her journey to this remote outpost had been anything but conventional. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she had watched her older brother struggle with gang violence and drugs. The military became her escape, her chance to serve something bigger than herself. What started as a way out of the neighborhood had evolved into a calling that defined every fiber of her being. The mission briefing had seemed straightforward enough. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was operating from a compound nestled in the valley below their position. The target, known only as the Architect, was believed to be coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The plan called for a surgical strike, get in, neutralize the threat, gather intelligence, and extract before enemy reinforcements could respond. Maria's team consisted of 8 highly trained operators, each with their own specialty. Commander Jake Richardson led the unit with the kind of quiet confidence that came from 15 years of special operations experience. His weathered face told stories of missions across 3 different theaters of war. Beside him, Petty Officer First Class Tommy Chun served as the team's communications specialist, his equipment allowing them to maintain contact with command and coordinate with air support when needed. The team's explosives expert, Chief Petty Officer Mike Rodriguez, had an uncanny ability to breach any barrier while minimizing collateral damage. His careful calculations and precise placement of charges had saved countless lives over the years. Rounding out the assault team were Petty Officers Dave Kim and Alex Turner, both seasoned operators whose synchronized movements spoke of years training together. Supporting the main assault force were Petty Officer Lisa Park, a combat medic whose skills had pulled more than one operator back from the edge of death, and Petty Officer James Morrison, whose expertise in intelligence gathering made him invaluable for processing any information they might recover from the target site. Maria served as the team's designated marksman, her role crucial in providing overwatch and eliminating threats that might compromise the mission. Her position on the ridgeline offered a commanding view of the entire valley, allowing her to cover multiple approach routes while remaining concealed from enemy observation. The compound itself appeared deceptively quiet in the early morning light. Satellite imagery had revealed a cluster of buildings surrounded by high walls, with several guard positions visible around the perimeter. What concerned Maria was how normal everything looked. In her experience, high-value targets rarely operated from locations that appeared so ordinary. Either their intelligence was wrong, or they were walking into a carefully prepared trap. Commander Richardson's voice crackled through her earpiece as the team began their descent into the valley. Overwatch, this is Alpha Lead. Beginning approach to objective. Keep your eyes open for anything that doesn't look right. Maria tracked their movement through her scope, noting how the terrain offered numerous positions where enemy forces could establish ambush points. The valley walls rose steeply on both sides, creating a natural funnel that could quickly become a killing field if things went wrong. She made mental notes of every boulder, every depression, every piece of cover that might prove crucial if the team needed to fight their way out. Copy that, Alpha Lead, Maria responded, her voice steady despite the growing sense of unease in her gut. Overwatch has eyes on your 6. No movement detected around the objective at this time. The team moved with practiced precision, using the natural terrain to mask their approach. They had trained for scenarios like this hundreds of times, but Maria knew that no amount of training could fully prepare them for the chaos of actual combat. Variables always emerged that no briefing could anticipate, and adaptability often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As the assault team reached the outer perimeter of the compound, Maria began scanning the surrounding hills through her scope. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't quite identify what was triggering her instincts. The compound remained quiet, almost too quiet for a location that supposedly housed a major terrorist operation. Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch, Maria transmitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Something doesn't feel right about this. The whole area is too quiet. No guards visible, no movement, nothing. Commander Richardson paused the team's advance, considering Maria's warning. He had learned to trust his sniper's instincts over the years. Maria had an uncanny ability to sense trouble before it manifested, a skill that had saved their lives on more than one occasion. Copy that, Overwatch. Alpha Team, hold position. Let's take a few minutes to observe and assess. The team settled into concealed positions around the compound's perimeter, each operator scanning their assigned sector for signs of enemy activity. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional radio check-in from each team member confirming their status. Maria continued her methodical scan of the surrounding terrain, paying particular attention to areas that would provide good firing positions for enemy snipers or machine gun teams. The rocky outcroppings and dense vegetation offered countless hiding spots, making her job exponentially more difficult. It was then that she noticed the first sign of trouble. A brief reflection of sunlight off what appeared to be glass or metal, emanating from a position roughly 800 meters to the northwest of the compound. Maria immediately adjusted her scope to focus on that area, her heart rate increasing as training and experience took over. Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch. I've got possible enemy sniper position northwest of your location, approximately 800 meters out. Stand by while I investigate. Maria carefully studied the suspected position, looking for any additional signs of enemy presence. The reflection could have been anything: a piece of discarded metal, broken glass, even natural minerals in the rock formation. But her experience told her to assume the worst until proven otherwise. As she focused her attention on the northwest position, movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Switching quickly to a different sector, Maria spotted what appeared to be armed figures moving through the vegetation on the eastern ridge. Her blood ran cold as she realized the true scope of what they were facing. Alpha Lead, we've got a problem, Maria transmitted urgently. Multiple enemy positions around the valley. This isn't a safe house, it's bait. We're walking into an ambush. Commander Richardson immediately ordered the team to take defensive positions as Maria continued her assessment of enemy forces. Through her scope, she began counting muzzle flashes and movement signatures. What she saw made her stomach drop. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a carefully coordinated trap involving dozens of enemy fighters positioned throughout the valley. Overwatch, give me numbers, Richardson demanded, his voice tight with controlled tension. Maria forced herself to remain calm as she conducted a systematic scan of the entire area. Alpha Lead, I count at least 30 enemy positions, possibly more. They've got the high ground on 3 sides: machine gun positions, sniper teams, and what looks like mortar crews. We need to get out of here now. But even as she spoke, Maria realized that escape might not be possible. The enemy had chosen their ambush site carefully, selecting terrain that would channel the SEAL team into a predetermined kill zone. The same geographical features that had concealed their approach now worked against them, limiting their options for withdrawal. The first shots rang out across the valley as enemy forces opened fire simultaneously from multiple positions. The carefully planned ambush erupted into chaos as bullets began impacting all around the SEAL team's positions. Maria watched through her scope as her teammates scrambled for whatever cover they could find, their training kicking in despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Taking heavy fire from multiple positions, Commander Richardson's voice cut through the radio static. Alpha Team, return fire and move to defensive positions. Overwatch, we need those enemy snipers neutralized now. Maria was already shifting her focus to the most immediate threats. The enemy sniper position she had identified earlier was now actively engaging her teammates, and She could see the muzzle flashes as the hostile marksman fired down into the valley. Without hesitation, Maria settled her crosshairs on the target area and began the complex calculations that would determine whether her shot found its mark. Wind speed, distance, elevation difference, target movement. All of these factors had to be processed in seconds while bullets whined overhead, and her teammates fought for their lives below. This was what she had trained for, what all those hours on the range and countless simulations had prepared her for. But the reality of combat brought its own unique challenges that no training environment could fully replicate. Maria controlled her breathing, steadying her rifle as she prepared to take her first shot. Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper clearly now, a bearded man in military fatigues who was methodically engaging targets in the valley below. She estimated the range at approximately 850 meters, well within her weapon's effective range, but challenging enough to require perfect shot placement. The Barrett M82's powerful .50 caliber round would ensure that any hit would be devastating, but Maria knew she would only get one shot before the enemy sniper realized he was being targeted from her position. Missing would not only compromise her own safety, but would leave the enemy marksman free to continue engaging her teammates. As she prepared to fire, Maria became aware of the broader tactical situation developing around them. Radio chatter indicated that multiple enemy machine gun positions were now active, and she could hear the distinctive sound of mortar rounds being dropped in a tube somewhere in the distance. The enemy wasn't just ambushing them. They were attempting to completely annihilate the SEAL team. The weight of responsibility settled on Maria's shoulders as she realized that her actions in the next few minutes might determine whether any of her teammates survived this engagement. 8 lives depended on her ability to neutralize enough enemy threats to create an opportunity for extraction or at least establish a defensible position. Maria's finger found the trigger as she made final adjustments to her aim point. The enemy sniper was lining up another shot at her teammates, presenting her with a clear profile target. This was her moment. Everything she had trained for, everything she had worked toward in her military career, came down to this single shot. The Barrett M82 roared as Maria squeezed the trigger, the massive rifle bucking against her shoulder with tremendous force. Through her scope, she watched as the .50 caliber round covered the distance to its target in less than a second. The enemy sniper simply disappeared from view as the powerful round found its mark, eliminating the first threat to her team. But there was no time to celebrate. Maria immediately began scanning for her next target, knowing that the enemy would now be aware of her position and would likely begin directing fire toward her location on the ridgeline. The battle for survival had only just begun, and the odds against the SEAL team seemed almost insurmountable. As she settled her sights on the next enemy position, Maria felt a familiar calm descend over her. This was what she had been born to do. Despite the overwhelming enemy numbers and the desperate nature of their situation, she felt ready for whatever came next. Her teammates were counting on her, and she had no intention of letting them down. The echo of Maria's first shot had barely faded when enemy fire began concentrating on her position. Bullets struck the rocks around her hiding spot, sending fragments of stone flying in all directions. She pressed herself closer to the ground while maintaining visual contact with the battlefield below through her scope. The enemy had clearly identified her general location and was attempting to suppress her ability to provide overwatch for her team. Commander Richardson's voice cut through the chaos on the radio. "Overwatch. We need immediate fire support on that machine gun position to our east. They've got us pinned down hard." Maria quickly shifted her scope toward the eastern ridge where she had earlier spotted enemy movement. Through the magnified optics, she could see a heavy machine gun position that had been cleverly concealed among the rocks. The gun crew was laying down devastating fire on her teammates' positions, making any movement extremely dangerous. The gunner was partially protected by a rocky outcropping, but Maria could see enough of his profile to attempt a shot. Calculating the range at approximately 920 meters, Maria made the necessary adjustments to her scope. The target was farther away than her first shot, and the machine gunner was moving as he traversed his weapon back and forth across the valley floor. This would require perfect timing and shot placement to be effective. She watched the gunner's pattern for several seconds, noting how he would pause briefly at certain points in his traverse to concentrate fire on specific targets. When he paused to reload, Maria saw her opportunity. The man's head and upper torso were clearly visible as he worked to change the ammunition belt on his weapon. Maria controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The Barrett roared again, and she watched through her scope as the massive round covered the distance to the target. The machine gun position went silent as her shot found its mark, eliminating the second immediate threat to her team. "Good shot. Overwatch," came Richardson's voice over the radio. "That's given us some breathing room, but we've still got multiple hostiles moving in from the north." Maria immediately began scanning the northern approach routes, searching for the movement Richardson had referenced. Through her scope, she spotted a group of approximately 6 enemy fighters moving down a narrow ravine that would bring them within assault range of her team's position. They were using the terrain skillfully, staying low and moving in short rushes that made them difficult targets. The range to the advancing enemy fighters was closer than her previous targets, approximately 650 meters, but they were moving through broken terrain that offered multiple concealment opportunities. Maria would need to time her shots carefully to catch them during their movement phases when they were exposed between cover positions. She selected the lead fighter as her target, a man carrying what appeared to be an RPG launcher. If that weapon got close enough to her team's position, it could prove devastating to their defensive efforts. Maria tracked his movement for several seconds, predicting where he would next appear based on the terrain features ahead of his current position. When the RPG gunner covered a rush toward the next concealment position, Maria was ready. Her third shot caught him mid-stride, and the man tumbled down the rocky slope. The other enemy fighters in the group immediately went to ground, realizing they were being engaged by a sniper from an elevated position. "Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch. I've neutralized the RPG threat from the north, but there are still 5 hostiles in that ravine. They're pinned down for now, but they'll likely try to work around to a different approach route." "Copy that, Overwatch. Keep eyes on them while we deal with threats from the west. We've got mortars incoming, so be prepared to move if they start bracketing your position." As if summoned by Richardson's words, the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds filled the air. Maria pressed herself against the rocks as the first rounds impacted in the valley below, sending up tremendous clouds of dust and debris. The enemy was clearly attempting to neutralize the SEAL team through indirect fire, probably hoping to drive them from their defensive positions into the open where other enemy units could engage them more effectively. The mortar barrage lasted for nearly 2 minutes, with rounds impacting throughout the valley in a pattern designed to suppress the entire area. When the bombardment finally stopped, Maria cautiously raised her head to assess the situation. Dust and smoke obscured much of her view, but she could hear small arms fire resuming as both sides re-engaged. "Alpha Team, sound off," Richardson commanded over the radio. "Report status and ammunition." One by one, Maria listened as her teammates reported their condition. Remarkably, none had been seriously injured in the mortar attack, though several reported near misses, and everyone was running low on ammunition. The reality of their tactical situation was becoming increasingly clear. They were outnumbered, running low on supplies, and facing an enemy that had clearly planned this ambush carefully. "Command, this is Alpha Lead," Richardson transmitted to their headquarters element. "We are in contact with overwhelming enemy forces, requesting immediate close air support and emergency extraction. Our position is not sustainable." The response from command was not encouraging. Weather conditions had grounded most air assets, and the nearest available support was at least 30 minutes away. The SEAL team would have to hold their position and fight off superior enemy forces with limited ammunition until help could arrive. Maria resumed her systematic scan of the battlefield, looking for priority targets that posed the greatest threat to her team's survival. Through her scope, she spotted what appeared to be an enemy commander position on the western ridge. Several fighters were clustered around a man who was clearly directing the overall attack through hand signals and radio communications. Eliminating enemy leadership could potentially disrupt their coordinated assault and buy precious time for the SEAL team. The range to the command position was approximately 1,100 meters, pushing the effective range of her weapon system, but still within the realm of possibility for an experienced marksman. Maria studied the target area carefully, noting wind conditions and elevation differences. At this range, even small environmental factors could cause her shot to miss by several feet. She would need to wait for optimal conditions and perfect shot placement to have any chance of success. The enemy commander appeared to be using a radio, standing partially exposed while coordinating with his various unit leaders. Maria could see him clearly through her scope, a tall man in military fatigues with distinctive facial hair and what appeared to be officer's insignia on his uniform. This was definitely a high-value target whose elimination could significantly impact enemy capabilities. As she prepared for the long-range shot, Maria became aware of movement much closer to her position. Scanning the ridgeline to her immediate flanks, she spotted two enemy fighters who had apparently worked their way around to assault her sniper position. They were approximately 200 meters away and moving carefully through the rocks, clearly attempting to eliminate the threat she posed to their overall operation. This created an immediate tactical dilemma. The enemy commander represented a strategic target whose elimination could benefit her entire team, but the approaching fighters posed an immediate threat to her own survival. If she took the time to engage the distant command position, the closer enemies might reach her location before she could deal with them. Maria made a split-second decision based on her training and experience. Immediate threats always took priority over strategic targets, regardless of their potential value. She quickly shifted her scope to the closer enemy fighters, abandoning the long-range shot in favor of protecting her own position. The first enemy fighter was moving between two large boulders when Maria acquired him in her sights. At 200 meters, her .50 caliber round would be devastatingly effective, but she also needed to consider the location of the second fighter to avoid being flanked while engaging the first target. Maria's fourth shot eliminated the lead enemy fighter instantly, but she immediately began searching for his companion through her scope. The second man had gone to ground when his partner was hit, making him much more difficult to locate among the rocky terrain. Maria knew he was still out there somewhere, probably trying to work his way closer to her position. Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch. I've got enemy fighters moving on my position. I may need to relocate soon. Negative, Overwatch. We need you to maintain that position as long as possible. We're taking heavy pressure from multiple directions, and your fire support is critical to our survival. Maria understood the tactical reality of their situation. Her elevated position provided the only opportunity to observe and engage enemy forces throughout the valley. If she abandoned this location, her team would lose their primary advantage in what was already a hopeless fight against superior numbers. She continued scanning for the second enemy fighter while simultaneously monitoring the broader battle developing below. Through her scope, she could see that enemy forces were gradually working closer to her team's defensive positions. It was only a matter of time before they would be overrun unless something changed dramatically in their favor. The distinctive crack of a rifle shot from somewhere to her left announced that the second enemy fighter had revealed his position. The bullet struck the rocks near Maria's head, confirming that he had managed to work relatively close to her location. She immediately rolled away from her previous firing position while trying to locate the source of the incoming fire. Using the terrain to mask her movement, Maria worked her way approximately 20 meters to a new position that offered different angles of observation while providing better protection from the enemy fighter's location. From this new vantage point, she could see movement in the rocks where she believed the hostile was concealed. The enemy fighter made the mistake of exposing himself while attempting to reposition for a better shot at Maria's assumed location. Through her scope, she could see him clearly as he moved between cover positions. Maria's fifth shot caught him in mid-movement, eliminating the immediate threat to her position. With her immediate area secured, Maria returned her attention to the broader tactical situation. The enemy mortar crews appear to be preparing for another bombardment, and she could see additional hostile forces moving into assault positions around the valley perimeter. Time was running out for the SEAL team, and their ammunition supplies were becoming critically low. Alpha Lead, what's our ammunition status? Maria transmitted, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We're down to less than 2 magazines per man, Richardson replied grimly. How are you holding up, Overwatch? Maria checked her own ammunition supply and felt her heart sink. She had started the mission with 10 rounds for her Barrett rifle, and she had already expended 5 of them. With only 5 rounds remaining, every shot would need to count if she hoped to continue providing effective support for her team. The sound of approaching helicopters in the distance brought the first glimmer of hope the team had experienced since the ambush began. Through her scope, Maria could see enemy fighters looking skyward and beginning to reposition in response to the approaching aircraft. If air support could arrive in time, it might provide the decisive advantage needed to turn the tide of battle. But Maria also knew that the next few minutes would be critical. The enemy would likely launch a final assault before close air support could effectively engage, hoping to eliminate the SEAL team before outside help could intervene. Everything would depend on how well the team could hold their positions until help arrived. The sound of approaching helicopters grew stronger, but Maria could see through her scope that the enemy forces were not retreating. Instead, they appeared to be accelerating their assault, clearly hoping to eliminate the SEAL team before air support could effectively intervene. Enemy fighters who had been moving cautiously were now advancing with desperate urgency toward her teammates' positions. Through her scope, Maria watched as approximately 15 enemy fighters began a coordinated rush from the eastern ridge. They were moving in teams of 3 to 4 men, using covering fire to advance in bounds toward the valley floor where her teammates were positioned. This was clearly their final assault, designed to overwhelm the SEAL team through sheer numbers before help could arrive. Alpha Lead, I've got multiple enemy squads moving on your position from the east. They're making a coordinated assault. Approximately 15 fighters advancing in bounds. Copy that, Overwatch. We see them. Engage at will. We need to break up their assault before they get within grenade range. Maria selected the lead team as her priority target, for fighters were advancing together, with one man clearly acting as the team leader based on his position and the way the others oriented on him. Eliminating the leader might disrupt their coordination and slow their advance. The range was approximately 750 meters, and the targets were moving rapidly across broken terrain. Maria would need to lead her target significantly to account for his movement, and the time it would take her bullet to cover the distance. She tracked the team leader for several seconds, noting his speed and direction, then aimed at a point where she calculated he would be when her bullet arrived. Maria's 6th shot rang out across the valley, and she watched through her scope as the team leader stumbled and fell. The other 3 members of his team immediately went to ground, disrupting their assault pattern and creating confusion among the advancing enemy forces. But there were still multiple teams advancing, and Maria had only 4 rounds remaining. She quickly shifted to target another assault team that was closer to her teammates' positions. These fighters had advanced to within 400 meters of the SEAL defensive perimeter and were preparing to make their final rush. If they succeeded in getting close enough to use grenades, the outcome would be catastrophic for the surrounded Americans. The second enemy team was using a dry creek bed for concealment as they advanced. Maria could only catch glimpses of them as they moved between covered positions, making target acquisition extremely challenging. She waited patiently, tracking their probable movement route and predicting where they would next appear. When the enemy point man exposed himself to scout the next bound, Maria was ready. Her 7th shot caught him as he attempted to signal his team forward. The remaining members of that team went to ground immediately. Their advance effectively stopped for the moment. But even as Maria engaged individual targets, she could see that the overall tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. More enemy fighters were visible on the western ridge, and what appeared to be a heavy weapons team was setting up a recoilless rifle on the northern approach. The enemy was committing everything they had to eliminate the SEAL team before air support could arrive. The helicopter sounds were much closer now, and Maria could actually see aircraft approaching from the south through gaps in the mountain ridges. But she also knew that attack helicopters would need several minutes to identify targets and coordinate their fires to avoid hitting friendly forces. Those few minutes might be more than her team had. Alpha Lead, I can see air support approaching from the south, but we've got new problems. Heavy weapons team setting up on the north ridge, and more fighters moving in from the west. Copy, Overwatch. Do what you can to delay them. We're almost out of ammunition down here. Maria shifted her scope to the heavy weapons position on the northern ridge. Through her magnified optics, she could see 3 enemy fighters assembling what appeared to be a 75mm recoilless rifle. If that weapon became operational, it could destroy any cover her teammates were using and make their positions completely untenable. The range to the weapons team was approximately 850 meters, well within her rifle's capability, but challenging because of the multiple targets and the critical nature of timing. She needed to eliminate the weapon system before it could engage her team, but she also had to consider which target would most effectively neutralize the threat. Maria decided to target the gunner, who was in the process of sighting the weapon toward her team's position. If she could eliminate him at the critical moment, it might prevent the weapon from being used effectively even if the other crew members were still alive. She watched carefully as the crew completed their setup procedures. The gunner was clearly preparing to fire, adjusting his sight picture and positioning himself behind the weapon. This was Maria's moment, the brief window when her target was stationary and clearly visible. Her 8th shot eliminated the recoilless rifle gunner just as he was preparing to fire. The other crew members dove for cover, abandoning their weapon for the moment. But Maria knew this was only a temporary reprieve. They would likely attempt to bring the weapon back into action once they recovered from the shock of their gunner's elimination. With only 2 rounds remaining, Maria had to make critical decisions about target priority. Enemy forces were advancing from multiple directions, and she could not possibly engage them all effectively. She needed to focus on threats that posed the greatest danger to her team's immediate survival. The approaching helicopters were now clearly visible, and she could see that they were attack aircraft configured for close air support missions. But the aircraft were still several minutes away from being able to effectively engage enemy targets, and Maria's team needed help immediately. Through her scope, she spotted an enemy fighter approaching her teammate's position with what appeared to be explosive charges. If he succeeded in getting close enough to their defensive perimeter, he could potentially breach their protective cover and expose them to direct assault. This was exactly the kind of immediate threat that required her attention. The bomber was approximately 300 meters from her team's position and moving carefully from cover to cover. Maria tracked his movement pattern, noting that he would occasionally expose himself completely as he rushed between concealment positions. She would have one clear shot when he made his next movement. When an enemy bomber broke from cover to rush toward the next position, Maria was ready. Her 9th shot caught him in mid-stride, eliminating the explosive threat to her team. But she was now down to her final round, and enemy forces were still advancing from multiple directions. The sound of helicopter rotors was much closer now, and Maria could see the lead aircraft beginning its attack run on enemy positions along the western ridge. The 30mm cannon fire from the Apache helicopter was devastatingly effective against the enemy fighters caught in the open, and she watched as multiple hostile positions were eliminated in rapid succession. But even as air support began engaging enemy forces, Maria spotted one final critical threat. An enemy sniper had taken position on the eastern ridge and was clearly preparing to engage her teammates from an elevated firing position. The range was approximately 900 meters, and the hostile marksman had good concealment among the rocks. This would be Maria's most challenging shot of the entire engagement. With only 1 round remaining, She had to make a perfect shot at maximum range against a partially concealed target who was actively trying to kill her teammates. There would be no second chance, no opportunity to correct for errors in wind calculation or range estimation. Maria studied the enemy sniper position carefully, noting wind indicators and calculating the complex ballistics required for such a long-range shot. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, with only his head and shoulders visible as he prepared his own shot. One small error in her calculations would result in a clean miss, leaving the enemy free to engage her team. She controlled her breathing and settled her crosshairs on the target. The enemy sniper was clearly focused on acquiring targets in the valley below, unaware that he was being observed by Maria's scope. This was her advantage. He was stationary and completely focused on his own target acquisition. Maria squeezed the trigger on her final round, sending the .50 caliber bullet across nearly a kilometer of mountain terrain. Through her scope, she watched as her shot found its mark, eliminating the enemy sniper threat just as he was preparing to fire on her teammates. With her ammunition expended, Maria was now limited to observation and coordination duties. But the arrival of close air support had fundamentally changed the tactical situation. Apache helicopters were systematically engaging enemy positions throughout the valley, and she could see hostile forces beginning to withdraw from their assault positions. Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch. I'm Winchester on ammunition, but air support is engaging effectively. Enemy forces appear to be breaking contact and withdrawing to the north. Outstanding work, Overwatch. Your fire support kept us alive until the cavalry arrived. We're going to hold position until we can coordinate extraction with the air assets. Maria watched through her scope as the helicopter gunships continued their methodical destruction of enemy positions. The carefully planned ambush that had nearly succeeded in eliminating her team was now falling apart under the devastating firepower of modern attack helicopters. Enemy fighters who had been advancing confidently just minutes before were now fleeing for their lives across the mountainous terrain. The SEAL team had survived one of the most challenging tactical situations possible, a carefully planned ambush by overwhelming enemy forces in terrain that favored the attackers. Their survival had depended on training, teamwork, and the individual actions of every team member contributing to their collective success. But Maria knew that her role as the team's designated marksman had been particularly critical. Her ability to engage enemy threats at long range had disrupted their coordinated assault and bought precious time for air support to arrive. Each of her 9 shots had eliminated a specific threat to her team's survival, from enemy snipers and machine gunners to assault teams and heavy weapons crews. As she watched enemy forces continuing their withdrawal under pressure from the attack helicopters, Maria felt a mixture of relief and professional satisfaction. The mission had not gone according to plan, and they had never located their original high-value target. But they had survived a devastating ambush and eliminated numerous enemy fighters in the process. The sound of additional helicopters approaching from the south announced the arrival of extraction aircraft. Through her scope, Maria could see transport helicopters moving toward predetermined landing zones, while attack aircraft continued to provide security. Their ordeal was nearly over, but the lessons learned from this engagement would stay with every team member for the rest of their careers. Maria began preparing her equipment for extraction while continuing to provide overwatch for her team's movement to the landing zone. Her Barrett rifle had performed flawlessly throughout the engagement, and she felt grateful for the countless hours of training that had prepared her for moments like this. Every shot had counted, every decision had mattered, and somehow they had all survived to fight another day. The extraction helicopters settled into the designated landing zone with practiced precision, their rotor wash creating swirling clouds of dust and debris across the valley floor. Maria maintained her overwatch position on the ridgeline, scanning the surrounding terrain for any signs of enemy forces attempting to interfere with the extraction process. Though the immediate threat had been neutralized by air support, she knew that scattered enemy fighters might still pose a danger to the vulnerable aircraft. Through her scope, Maria watched as her teammates began moving toward the landing zone in tactical formation. Despite their exhaustion and depleted ammunition supplies, they maintained proper security protocols during their movement. Commander Richardson led the team with the same calm professionalism he had displayed throughout the entire engagement, while each team member covered assigned sectors of fire. The extraction process would be the most vulnerable phase of their operation. Helicopters on the ground presented lucrative targets for any remaining enemy forces, and the SEAL team would be exposed during their movement to the aircraft. Maria's role as Overwatch remained critical even though her ammunition was exhausted. Her elevated position still provided the best observation of potential threat areas. Alpha Lead, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on your movement to the LZ. No enemy activity observed at this time, but I'm continuing to scan for threats. Copy that, Overwatch. Maintain observation until we're all aboard and ready to lift off. Air support is reporting scattered enemy contacts withdrawing to the northwest, but nothing in immediate vicinity of the LZ. Maria systematically scanned each potential sniper position and ambush site around the landing zone. The enemy had demonstrated sophisticated planning and coordination during their ambush, suggesting they might have contingency plans for disrupting extraction operations. She couldn't afford to assume they were completely safe until every team member was aboard the helicopters and airborne. As her teammates reached the first extraction helicopter, Maria began her own movement toward the landing zone. Without ammunition for her primary weapon, she relied on her sidearm for protection during the descent from her sniper position. The rocky terrain that had provided excellent concealment during the engagement now presented challenges as she moved quickly while maintaining situational awareness. The adrenaline that had sustained her throughout the firefight was beginning to fade, replaced by the physical and emotional exhaustion that followed intense combat operations. Her hands trembled slightly as she secured her equipment, a normal physiological response to the stress she had experienced over the past several hours. But her mind remained focused on completing the mission safely. During her movement down the ridgeline, Maria reflected on the engagement they had just survived. 9 shots fired, 9 enemy threats eliminated. Each shot had been critical to her team's survival, demonstrating the importance of precision marksmanship in modern special operations. But she also understood that individual actions, regardless of how skillful, meant nothing without effective teamwork and coordination. The mission had failed to achieve its primary objective of capturing or eliminating the high-value target known as the Architect. Intelligence reports had clearly been compromised, leading the SEAL team into a carefully planned trap instead of a successful direct action mission. Someone had known they were coming, and that knowledge had nearly resulted in the complete elimination of one of America's most elite military units. As Maria reached the valley floor, she could see that her teammates were already aboard the extraction aircraft. The helicopter crews were maintaining security while waiting for her arrival, their door gunners scanning the surrounding terrain for threats. The professionalism and coordination of all elements involved in the extraction demonstrated the high level of training that made such complex operations possible. Commander Richardson waited at the helicopter door as Maria approached, his expression showing both relief at her safe arrival and concern for her condition. The team leader had been responsible for 8 lives during the engagement, and Maria could see the weight of that responsibility in his eyes, even though everyone had survived. "Outstanding work up there, Santos," Richardson said as he helped her aboard the aircraft. "Your fire support made the difference between life and death for all of us. I'm recommending you for decoration when we get back to base." Maria nodded her acknowledgement, but her focus remained on the tactical situation until they were safely airborne. Only when the helicopter lifted off and began climbing away from the valley did she allow herself to fully process what they had just experienced. The ambush had been the most intense combat action of her military career, testing every aspect of her training and experience. As the helicopters gained altitude and began their flight back to base, Maria looked down at the valley where the engagement had taken place. Smoke still rose from several locations where air support had engaged enemy positions, and she could see the scattered debris of equipment abandoned by fleeing enemy forces. The carefully prepared ambush site now looked like exactly what it was, a battlefield where superior training and equipment had overcome overwhelming numbers. The flight back to their forward operating bays provided time for initial debriefing and medical evaluation. Combat medic Lisa Park checked each team member for injuries, noting the various cuts and bruises they had sustained during the firefight. Remarkably, none of the team had suffered serious wounds despite the intensity of enemy fire they had faced. Petty Officer Chun began documenting their ammunition expenditure and equipment status for the formal after-action report that would follow. These administrative details seemed mundane after the life and death struggle they had just experienced, but Maria understood the importance of accurate record-keeping for improving future operations. During the flight, Commander Richardson conducted a preliminary tactical debrief with each team member, gathering their observations and lessons learned while the details remained fresh in their memories. Each operator's perspective contributed to the overall understanding of what had gone wrong with the mission and how they had managed to survive despite the odds against them. When Richardson reached Maria for her portion of the debrief, she provided a detailed account of each engagement she had conducted from her Overwatch position. The ranges, target descriptions, and tactical effects of each shot would be documented for analysis by military intelligence specialists attempting to understand the enemy's capabilities and tactics. Your target selection was textbook perfect, Richardson noted as they discussed her engagement sequence. You prioritized immediate threats to the team while maximizing the tactical impact of each shot. That kind of fire discipline saved all our lives. Maria appreciated the commander's assessment, but she was already thinking about areas where her performance could be improved. The long-range shot at the enemy commander had been abandoned due to more immediate threats, but eliminating enemy leadership might have shortened the overall engagement. These were the kinds of tactical decisions that would be analyzed extensively during formal debriefing sessions. As their helicopter approached the forward operating base, Maria could see the activity level that indicated word of their engagement had already reached headquarters elements. Additional aircraft were being prepared for launch, suggesting that follow-up operations might be planned to exploit intelligence gathered from the battlefield. The landing at their base marked the official end of the combat phase of their operation, but Maria knew that extensive debriefing and analysis would continue for several days. Every aspect of the mission would be examined to identify both successes and areas for improvement. The intelligence failure that had led them into the ambush would be investigated thoroughly to prevent similar incidents in the future. Medical personnel met the team as they disembarked from the extraction helicopters, conducting more thorough examinations than had been possible during the flight. Despite their exposure to intense enemy fire, all team members were cleared for duty after treatment for minor injuries and dehydration. The first formal debriefing session began within hours of their return, led by the squadron intelligence officer and attended by senior leadership from throughout the special operations community. Maria's role as the designated marksman made her observations particularly valuable for understanding enemy tactics and capabilities. During the debriefing, satellite imagery and communications intercepts were combined with the team's first-hand observations to create a comprehensive picture of the engagement. The enemy's sophisticated planning and coordination suggested a higher level of capability than previously assessed, requiring adjustments to future operational planning. Maria provided detailed information about each target she had engaged, including range estimates, target behavior, and observed effects of her fires. This data would be used to validate intelligence assessments about enemy equipment and training levels. Her descriptions of enemy movement patterns and coordination helped analysts understand their tactical doctrine. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in Maria's observations about the enemy command element she had identified on the Western Ridge. Although she had been unable to engage that target due to more immediate threats, Her description of their apparent coordination activities provided insights into enemy command and control capabilities. As the formal debriefing concluded, Maria found herself reflecting on the broader implications of their experience. The enemy had demonstrated sophisticated intelligence, gathering, and operational planning capabilities that suggested external support or training. This was not simply a local insurgent group, but a well-organized military force with significant resources and capabilities. The mission had also demonstrated the continued importance of individual marksmanship skills in modern warfare. Despite advances in technology and weapon systems, there were still situations where the skill and judgment of a trained sniper could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Maria's 9 shots had each contributed to her team's survival in ways that could not have been achieved through other means. In the days following their return, Maria spent considerable time analyzing her own performance during the engagement. She reviewed each shot decision, considering alternative approaches, and evaluating the effectiveness of her target prioritization. This self-assessment was part of the continuous improvement process that made Special Operations Forces so effective. The formal after-action report documented numerous lessons learned from the engagement, ranging from intelligence preparation requirements to ammunition load planning. Maria's experiences contributed to recommendations for enhanced training scenarios that would better prepare future teams for similar situations. Recognition for the team's performance came in various forms over the following weeks. Individual decorations acknowledged each member's contributions to their collective survival, while unit citations recognized their performance as a team under extreme conditions. For Maria, these honors represented not personal achievement, but validation of the training and preparation that had made their survival possible. The engagement also resulted in significant intelligence value despite the mission's failure to achieve its primary objective. Analysis of enemy equipment recovered from the battlefield provided insights into their capabilities and sources of supply. Communications intercepts during the battle revealed information about their organization and command structure. Most importantly, the SEAL team's survival and successful extraction demonstrated American military capabilities to enemies who had expected to achieve an easy victory through their ambush. The enemy had committed significant resources to what they believed would be a decisive engagement, only to suffer heavy casualties while failing to achieve their objective of eliminating an American Special Operations team. 3 months after the ambush in the Afghan Valley, Maria Santos found herself standing before a formation of Navy SEALs and other Special Operations personnel at Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters. The ceremony recognizing her actions during the engagement represented more than just individual achievement. It symbolized the dedication and professionalism that defined America's elite military units. The Silver Star being pinned to her uniform represented the 3rd highest military decoration for valor, recognizing her exceptional courage and tactical skill during the ambush. But for Maria, the real meaning of the ceremony lay in honoring the teamwork and sacrifice that had enabled their entire unit to survive an impossible situation. Commander Richardson, who had also been decorated for his leadership during the engagement, stood nearby as the citation was read aloud. The formal language of military decorations could never fully capture the intensity of those critical moments when individual actions determined life or death for an entire team. But it represented official recognition of the standards expected from America's most elite warriors. The intelligence analysis following their mission had revealed the true scope of what they had faced that day. Enemy forces had numbered more than 60 fighters, positioned in carefully prepared defensive positions throughout the valley. The ambush had been planned for months, using detailed intelligence about American Special Operations tactics and capabilities. What made their survival even more remarkable was the discovery that the enemy had specifically targeted SEAL Team 6 for elimination. Intercepted communications revealed that destroying an American Special Operations team would have been used for significant propaganda purposes, potentially inspiring increased recruitment and support for enemy operations throughout the region. The after-action analysis had also vindicated Maria's tactical decisions during the engagement. Computer modeling of the battlefield dynamics showed that her target prioritization had been optimal given the threats facing her team. Each of her 9 shots had eliminated threats that could have resulted in American casualties if left unengaged. Her engagement of the enemy sniper during the opening phase of the ambush had prevented him from targeting individual team members as they sought defensive positions. The machine gunner she had eliminated would have been able to suppress her team's movement and pin them in positions where they could have been overrun by advancing enemy forces. The RPG gunner she had neutralized in the northern ravine would have been able to destroy the protective cover her teammates were using, exposing them to direct assault by enemy fighters. Her elimination of the recoilless rifle crew had prevented them from using heavy weapons that could have devastated the SEAL defensive positions. Most critically, her final shot eliminating the enemy sniper on the eastern ridge had prevented him from engaging her teammates during the crucial period when air support was arriving. That single shot might have saved multiple American lives during the most vulnerable phase of their extraction. The tactical lessons learned from the engagement had already been incorporated into training programs throughout the special operations community. Maria's experience had contributed to updated marksmanship training that emphasized target prioritization under extreme stress conditions. Her ammunition management during the engagement, 9 shots, 9 kills, had become a case study in fire discipline and precision shooting. Training scenarios now included situations where snipers must achieve maximum effect with limited ammunition, reflecting the realities of extended combat operations. The mission had also resulted in significant changes to intelligence preparation and mission planning procedures. The failure to detect the enemy's advanced knowledge of their operation had led to enhanced security protocols and verification procedures for future missions. But perhaps the most important outcome of their experience was the demonstration that superior training and individual skill could overcome overwhelming numerical disadvantage. The enemy had committed significant resources to what they believed would be a certain victory, only to suffer devastating losses while failing to achieve their objective. In the months following the engagement, Maria had participated in numerous training exercises designed to share the lessons learned from their survival. Her experiences had been incorporated into advanced marksmanship courses and tactical decision-making scenarios used to prepare future special operations personnel. The psychological impact of surviving such an intense combat experience had required professional counseling and peer support to process effectively. Maria had participated in comprehensive debriefing sessions designed to help combat veterans integrate their experiences and maintain their effectiveness for future operations. Her relationship with her teammates had been strengthened by their shared experience of survival against overwhelming odds. The bonds forged during those critical hours of combat created connections that would last throughout their military careers and beyond. Commander Richardson had been promoted and assigned to a senior position within Naval Special Warfare Command, where his experience could benefit the broader special operations community. His leadership during the ambush had been recognized as exemplary, demonstrating the importance of calm decision-making under extreme pressure. The other team members had also received recognition for their individual contributions to their collective survival. Each had performed their assigned duties with exceptional skill while adapting to rapidly changing tactical situations. Their success represented the culmination of years of training and the application of hard-earned experience. The enemy forces they had faced that day had suffered significant losses, with intelligence estimates suggesting that more than 30 fighters had been killed or wounded during the engagement. The arrival of close air support had prevented any organized enemy withdrawal, resulting in the destruction of most equipment and weapons they had positioned for the ambush. Follow-up operations in the same area had recovered significant intelligence materials, including communications equipment and documentation that provided insights into enemy planning and coordination. This intelligence had been used to disrupt similar operations being planned against other American and coalition forces. The high-value target they had originally been sent to capture known as the Architect, had eventually been located and eliminated during a subsequent operation. Intelligence gathered from their ambush experience had contributed to the successful planning and execution of that later mission. For Maria personally, the engagement had validated years of training and preparation while demonstrating areas where her skills could be further developed. She had emerged from the experience as one of the most combat-experienced snipers in the special operations community. Her performance during the ambush had led to selection for additional specialized training and assignment to increasingly challenging missions. The confidence gained from proving herself under the most extreme conditions had enhanced her effectiveness in subsequent operations. The story of their survival had become part of the unofficial history of naval special warfare, passed down through training programs and informal mentoring relationships. Future generations of SEALs would learn from their experience and draw inspiration from their demonstration of courage under fire. Maria's journey from the streets of East Los Angeles to decorated special operations warrior represented the opportunities available to those willing to commit themselves to excellence and service. Her success had inspired other women to pursue careers in special operations, demonstrating that capability and determination were the only qualifications that truly mattered. The ceremony, concluding with the presentation of decorations, was followed by a reception where Maria had the opportunity to meet with families of her teammates and senior military leadership. These personal interactions reminded her that military service was ultimately about protecting the people and values that defined American society. As she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment, Maria felt grateful for the experiences that had shaped her character and capabilities. The ambush in Afghanistan represented just one chapter in a career dedicated to serving something larger than herself. The lessons learned from that engagement would continue to influence her approach to future missions and her role in training the next generation of special operations personnel. Her experience had demonstrated that individual excellence, combined with effective teamwork, could overcome even the most challenging tactical situations. Looking toward the future, Maria understood that her role as a senior enlisted leader would involve not just participating in operations, but helping to develop the capabilities and mindset required for success in an increasingly complex operational environment. The recognition she had received was meaningful not as personal achievement, but as validation of the standards and values that define the special operations community. Her success reflected the collective investment of countless instructors, mentors, and teammates who had contributed to her development. The ambush in the Afghan Valley had tested every aspect of her training and character, revealing both strengths and areas for continued growth. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that the principles of courage, competence, and commitment that defined her service would enable her to face whatever challenges lay ahead in her continuing career as one of America's elite warriors.